Welcome to the Wealth Matters podcast, where investors come together to better understand how to build passive cash flow and create generational wealth without all the confusing mumbo-jumbo. Here's your host and co-author of Amazon #1 bestseller, Alpesh Pamar.
Welcome to Wealth Matters podcast. I am going to talk to Miss Amy Sylvis today. She's the founder and principal of Sylvis Capital, a real estate firm that invests in large multifamily properties in emerging markets throughout the US. Accredited and non-accredited investors appreciate investing alongside Amy's team to take advantage of not only their extensive experience and also their detailed research and exclusive relationships. And today, of course, I want to talk to Amy about the mindset. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we start with this question with everyone, and we chatted about other stuff right before the podcast. So I don't want to spill any beans, but tell us something interesting or funny about yourself.
Oh, interesting or funny. Let me think. Well, I'm a Los Angeles native, which a lot of people aren't necessarily from here, but I have overcome quite a bit in my life. And I'd love to talk a bit about some of the health challenges I've had and what's gotten me to where I am today. And I'm also a huge college football fan, and I go to most football games of my team every year. So just a little smattering about me, but I think all of those facts are interesting.
Thank you. So let's talk about real estate, right? Because that is how you and I are connected, and we know a lot of the common people. What was your very first real estate investment?
Yes, my first real estate investment was a passive investment in a medium-sized multifamily project in Chattanooga, Tennessee. This was about 12 years ago, where Chattanooga was not on the radar.
Right.
Yeah, it was quite a while.
I don't think I would be able to spell it either.
Yes, yeah. This is before the massive Volkswagen, plants that were built and all of those other things. So I had just read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think we're all familiar with that book. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I thought, I want to get in this real estate game. I don't quite have the education or experience yet to do it on my own, but passively investing is a great way to get to know the game. So that's what I did.
So that was 12 years ago. And how did it work out for you?
Thankfully, it worked out well. I know that doesn't happen for everybody, on their first try, but I think I was able to pick a great operator, which I think a lot of us agree is the #1 way to position yourself for success. And yes, got a nice return. And I thought, okay, I want to do this again. This is wonderful.
So that's interesting. So most of us, at least in this big game, right, multifamily to mobile home parks, all of us start with either buying our own single family or multifamily. But you started investing passively. So that is very interesting. How did you find that? Because right now, of course, and not to talk about you and I or all of us, but we see syndicators all over, right? Operators all over. We are advertising everywhere, LinkedIn, Facebook. But this was 12 years ago. You would barely know a lot of operators or syndicators. How did they find you, or how did you find them?
Yeah, so I decided to go to a investing boot camp. So once I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I made the decision, okay, this is where I want to take my career eventually. This is what I want to do, generate passive income. Yeah, I went to one of those gurus, those boot camps, and networked my socks off and got to know a few folks that I liked and trusted and wanted to start getting in the game. So I decided to invest with them.
So that is, and then that was your first passive or first investment and passive. How did you get started in investing in multifamily yourself?
That was a long journey. That was about a 10-year-long process, and we can get into that if you want. But yes, a lot of trials and failures. I mentioned I'm out here in Los Angeles, so I was looking at the Phoenix market. I was looking in Las Vegas. Was under contract with several different properties that never ended up passing due diligence, or my health got in the way. I have a lung issue that really set me back several times. I was trying to balance working my regular W-2 job. I come from the biotech sector and managing a full-time job, which was my illness, and then trying to create this side hustle of multifamily investing. And we can go into details if you'd like, but it took a good long 10 years until I was actually able to buy my first property as a general partner and as an owner operator.
And where was it?
So it was in Clarksville, Tennessee,
So
about
Tennessee,
an hour.
huh?
Yes,
Only Tennessee.
far away. Yes. About an hour northwest of Nashville, great little submarket. In fact, we just sold the property 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
But it
nice.
was an amazing property. Yes.
So actually, we are closing on our first, or that would be my first investment in Tennessee. So we are
Oh,
closing on this 5-park mobile home park portfolio in Tennessee, which is again about an hour from Nashville and an hour and a half from Knoxville. So it's right in the middle.
smart.
So yeah, we are closing on December 19th, finally.
Congratulations. Oh, mobile home parks are incredible.
Yeah, so this would be my third one. So yeah, right now we
Fun.
are focused on mobile home parks and senior
Yes.
housing. After seeing that everyone was doing multifamily, there was just the cap rates were compressing. There's so much competition. I switched course
Yes.
last year and decided to dive into this. So keeping my fingers crossed, but so far the
Yes.
other two are doing great. So yeah.
Very
hoping.
smart. Congratulations.
No, thank you. So let's
Yeah.
talk about mindset because you just alluded or spoke about your health issues. And of course,
Yes.
managing, even on the health issues, which is a really big deal, but then managing your W-2 and then trying to figure out, what all you could do to supplement your income or maybe create multiple streams of income.
Yes.
How important is mindset while investing in real estate?
I think it's everything. And I have to admit, I wasn't someone who thought that in the beginning. I'm a
Right.
very action oriented, I execute, I come up with the idea, I figure out the things that need to be done. It wasn't until I hit some failures and some pitfalls that I had to really take a step back and assess how much mindset was playing a role in my lack of success and then later my actual success. So many of our thoughts go on below our consciousness, right? In our subconscious, that we aren't even aware of and we may not necessarily have control over. So feeding our mind, which then feeds our thoughts and our emotions and our actions, it is a game changer. And again, this is coming from someone who thought all this was a bit woo-woo a few years ago, I'll admit. Truly.
No, yeah, I agree. So what are some of the obstacles you faced? One you just mentioned about health issues.
Yes, yeah. So I was born with an illness called cystic fibrosis. Many people have heard of
Oh.
it, but maybe don't know what it is. Essentially, it's a genetic disease. So I had it since birth, where my lungs gradually deteriorated over time with constant infections. And I'd spend 2 to 3 weeks several times a year in the hospital receiving IV antibiotics for very virulent pneumonia infections. So fast forward, I'm 41 years old and I'm very healthy thanks to a miracle drug 3 years ago. So everything ends well. But it was a journey.
Awesome.
It really was a journey of, hey, I don't know how long I'm going to live. My doctors told my parents I'd live to be 8 or 9 years old when I was born in 1981.
Whoa.
Yeah. And as the years went on, I thought, okay, I'm alive, but am I going to be able to hold down a job? For spending so much time in the hospital, being so sick, lack of energy. And it really occurred to me finally in my late 20s, early 30s, I might not always be able to trade my time for income. I need to figure out how to generate passive income.
Wow.
So while I'm in the hospital or God forbid, unable to work, I would be able to pay my bills. My parents sacrificed a lot. Maybe many of our listeners, you mentioned you're a parent, what it would be like to take care of a disabled child. And the last thing I wanted to do as an adult was to be financially dependent upon them because they already sacrificed so much. So I was really on a war path to figure out how I could continue to pay my own medical bills and the roof over my head and my food and all that. So anyway, as you can imagine, balancing all these things when it was tough even to hold down a job and then manage this illness, there were a lot of times that I got frustrated because my health did not allow me to do what needed to be done to enter into this real estate industry.
Oh, that is fascinating. And I'm glad that you are cured or pretty much with the miracle drug. But now that you mentioned, it's so nice of you to think about the financial side, right? Because if you are, for God forbid, dependent on your parents or siblings or whomsoever, right?
Yeah.
There is already a physical issue, right? Because they got to take care of you. There is mental side.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because but then there is financial, right? And we spoke about it earlier that I'm a fitness freak, right? I always look at the wealth as a triangle, right? So it's
Yes.
physical health, it's mental health, and financial health, right?
You
All
bet.
three are needed to
100%.
absolutely enjoy your life, right? So
Yes.
I can totally relate, even though I haven't passed through this, but I always think about these three, angles of the triangle that, if I want to enjoy my life, I can't be just trying to make money. I also
Right.
got to stay healthy mentally and physically.
Yes.
So how do you overcome this kind of obstacles with right mindset?
I think it really starts off with the goal in mind. As maybe that sounds a little corny, but figuring out where I wanted to go, what, and getting crystal clear with what I wanted to do. How did I want my life to look? Who did I want to be around? And then having the why behind it. I say the why is really the supercharger of kind of that mindset picture. And whether I was fueled by, at the time, not wanting to be a further burden on my parents, and they'd kill me for saying this. They're like, "Oh,
Right,
we'd
of
always take
course.
care of you." I'm like, "Of
Yeah.
course," but I still, I knew they sacrificed enough. But whether it was that, or now, my husband and I are dedicated to putting charities out of the fundraising business that we believe in. So whether it's the children's after-school programs in inner city Los Angeles, that we've dedicated our finances to, having that why was really the first step that allowed me to get to where I wanted to go. And the second step, and interrupt me if I'm talking for too
Yeah.
long,
Yeah.
but was really figuring out the next best thing I could do. So I was medically retired at age 35. I got too sick
Wow.
to work. I had to stop working. 35. I was on Social
Wow.
Security disability, basically my worst nightmare, right? I was
Right.
dependent upon the federal government to send me a measly amount of money. My goal to not have, or to be able to be self-sufficient, was, I was defeated. I didn't reach that goal when I had to medically retire because I became too sick. And many of my days were spent when I was medically retired, just trying to care for myself and do basic things like breathing. But I
Right.
still found a way every day, even if it was to read one page of a real estate book, even if it was to reach out and have a 10 to 15-minute conversation with someone in the industry that I could ask a few basic questions of, or I could go on, Zillow or LoopNet and analyze a property and
Right.
learn, what that might look like. So I think the mindset of there's always something that can be done, even if it's a tiny little thing and may feel insignificant. There's always something you can do every day, and you multiply that day after day
Yes.
after day, and it accumulates.
No, this is so great. So, a couple of things you mentioned are so important here. So, I want to reiterate, right? One, why is so important, and I highly recommend everyone read this book, Start With Why by Simon
Mhm.
Sinek. A great book. And that's when someone asked me, why are you doing this thing, and I was trying to figure it out, and I'm like, okay, there should be a way to figure this out, right? And I read
Yes.
the book, and I'm like, okay, it makes sense why you want to do this. So that is really important. And the second thing, even when you are medically retired, even when you are struggling, you are still taking baby steps, right? You are still going in the direction where you wanted to. So this is so important. A lot of time people think, oh, if I don't finish this like 10 pages every day, I'm not going to make any progress. But they
Right.
don't think you should at least start with finishing one page every day, and then maybe a couple of pages next week, right? It's just so that you stay in it, and maybe you figure out this is what interests you. Maybe it does not interest you anymore, right?
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. Well, and in my case too, it was 3 long years of being medically
Right.
retired and doing these
Wow.
tiny little things day after day. And then this miracle medication came.
Right.
And a lot of people may say, "Hey, Amy, where's my miracle medication? Where's the thing for me?" But you don't know what's around the corner in a
Right.
positive way. And my gosh, how happy I was that I took those repeated steps for over 1,000 days in a row, because once my health was back, guess what? I was off to the races because
Yes,
I had already laid that
exactly.
groundwork. I'd already
Right.
laid that foundation.
You are able to hit the ground running. Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Oh, this is great. So let's talk about the investment side. What are some of the mistakes you have made with your investment?
I love this. Well, as a self-proclaimed only child, not self-proclaimed, but I am an only child. A lot of people know, we can be independently minded and, do
Right.
things on our own. I really it didn't even occur to me partnering with people in the real estate space. Who would want to partner with a new person who'd only passively invested? This is one of the biggest mistakes that held me back for so long, is not only realizing my own value, but also the value of partnering with other people and how we could bring our skills, our mindset, our work ethic together to go further faster. So I would really say that's probably the biggest one I've made, just kind of overall in real estate. Specifically, if you want to talk about like a specific deal where I've made a mistake, like is that something you'd like to go
Yes,
down
that
that
would be
path as
great
well?
too.
All right.
Yes.
Of course, of course. So again, this first property I purchased that we just sold ended up doing extremely well. We were having trouble getting debt for the deal. It was a scatter site, multifamily complex. So we had a bunch of 8-plexes, 6-plexes,
Okay.
4-plexes scattered around. Very characteristic of Clarksville, Tennessee. It's got a bit more of a residential feel and not large, kind of all together multifamily. So anyway, we had to get an extension on, we were under contract. We had to extend. And the seller was not very happy with the fact that we weren't going to close when we originally said.
Of course.
And they neglected caring for the property as a punishment.
Oh.
And I have to admit, it naively didn't even occur to me that someone would stop caring for actual people and their home in those extra 30 days. So what ended up happening is there were leaks that weren't attended to. The residents were living in mold infested apartments, and it was costly. We had a nice, healthy CapEx budget when we closed to renovate units. And we ended up having to take that money instead of renovating and upgrading units and remediating this mold and water damage. So it was a naive mistake, and obviously one I will not make again. That wouldn't occur to me not to care for people for properties I own, but apparently not everyone thinks that way. So making sure to continue to do unit walkthroughs, especially while under contract, and if you have to extend the contract, extend closing, just to make sure the property management's still taking care of the people.
Yeah, so I was actually going to ask you, because usually we make sure that the property is in the same condition, right? So
yes.
Now what are some of the steps you would take? You mentioned one of those would be unit walkthrough. Would there be anything else? Because also we look at the rental, the new, latest rent roll as well, to make sure that the property is not has not gone from bad to worse.
Yes, exactly. Well, and even putting in the purchase and sale agreement, the fact that the property will be delivered in original condition, upon we do due diligence. So a lot of learning there. I'm not proud of that mistake, but I do talk about it because I think other people can learn from my naivete.
No, and always, right? The first one, we always forget certain steps to take, right? And this is another thing reminded me, my very first multifamily, which a 9-unit I bought in Birmingham, Alabama. I had tough time getting that as well, because it was my first one outside California.
Yes.
A commercial loan, right? You can get a single family Fannie Freddie without any issues. They just look at your credit score and pay stubs and you're done. They don't care about your experience. But in this case, they wanted to know how many properties have I owned in Birmingham. And, so it took me 4 months, and I had the same issue, not the same issue about the property, but the seller was getting antsy. He was so worried. And every time I extend, I had to put a little bit more earnest money, and I was always worried. But
absolutely.
I still have the property. It's doing great. Knock on wood.
Nice.
But it was a nightmare at that time, because I was like, 4 months. It takes that long to close the property.
That's wild. Yeah, yes. It happens though.
Yep. So what has been your best deal so far?
Oh, gosh. We're still doing the final calculations on this property, but it actually may be this same Clarksville, Tennessee property, if you can believe that. And I'll tell you, this is a shout out to market research and why choosing to invest in the right market is so important. Because, as I mentioned, we had a plan to renovate these older 1980s units that hadn't been touched since they were built. and increase rents because we knew that the market was experiencing a lot of net migration, positive net migration. Folks were getting pay increases at the great jobs that were coming into the area. We really weren't able to increase or to do those renovations again because of the CapEx issue. We had to spend the budget remediating mold. But because of the supply and demand and the job growth and the amount of people moving in, we were able to reach our 3-year post-renovation pro forma rents in 6 months.
Whoa.
So
wow.
We held the property for 2 years. And as you can imagine, we did quite well there. So I don't have, when you close, you still have pending bills and things, before you can give a final tally of what your returns are. But that little property and that tiny little market outside of Nashville, Tennessee served our investors quite well. So that very well may be one of our best projects. Of course, we have others that are ongoing that are going well, but in terms of dispositions, it's been a great one.
That's great. Congrats. And of course, last 3 years have been crazy just from timing perspective as well. So I think it's a good time to sell. I think you are making the right decision right now.
Without a doubt. Yes, I think you're right.
What has been your worst deal so far? And what did you learn from it?
Gosh, I did a joint venture deal that also in Tennessee in a different market we bought it right before COVID. And maybe 2 months before the pandemic. And so all of a sudden, these eviction moratoriums were coming up. Renters knew that they didn't have to pay rent. It was a struggle. It was a big struggle to get folks to pay rent. And as you can imagine, we still have to pay our mortgage, right? We still have to pay our lender, even if renters aren't paying their rent, we still have to pay insurance. We still have to pay taxes. So it was a struggle. And, we're of the mindset that we can make returns by still treating people well. We don't have to be slumlords. In fact, treating people well can actually enhance our business plan and enhance our returns. So even though folks weren't paying, most of them had been laid off, they weren't trying to play games. So we really had to double down on our property manager's relationship with the tenants, getting to know each and every person's, individual financial situation. And of course, all this is tricky, right? Because no one's trying to infect someone else, going into units, communicating. Tennessee was a little different than California, admittedly, but still, we were all trying to do the right thing. And it was a struggle. We had renovation plans. We took an NOI hit on our net operating income because our income plummeted quite a bit. But because we did take the time to see and understand each one of our residents' struggles, and even the few that we're trying to really, game the system to help them understand, hey, we know you don't have to pay rent, but here's how paying your rent benefits you. We're still able to, send repair and maintenance people out to help your unit if something breaks down. We're still able to keep the lights on and the insurance. If we foreclose on this property and the bank owns it, the chaos and the difficulty it's going to be as a resident, is going to be very difficult. So anyway, all long and the short of it, it was by far one of our most difficult because of the, extenuating circumstances, the black swan event that was COVID. We still ended up getting great returns when we sold several years later. But it was by far, I think, the worst in terms of it being just so challenging and so unexpected.
Oh, that time was difficult. So I'm glad that you were able to continue and figure out, right?
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
So you keep talking about Tennessee, like pretty much which markets do you really focus on right now and why?
Yes. So my last multifamily acquisition was in Huntsville, Alabama.
Okay, that's a good market.
I love talking about Alabama, especially to people in California, because they go, where? What? Yes. I think you mentioned Birmingham, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Huntsville is incredible. The United States Space Force, the latest the latest U.S. military division is relocating from Denver to Huntsville, Alabama. Yep. The FBI increasing 8,000 jobs in Huntsville. Wow. And of course, we all know of the great manufacturing plants that they have there. Northern Alabama is actually quite cosmopolitan, open-minded. There are a lot of people moving there. So we're thrilled to be in that market. And then also I closed a flex industrial deal about a month ago in Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh,
So,
okay. That's a
and
great market too.
it is lots of onshoring. We've heard of
Yep.
companies feeling uneasy about what's going on in China, what's going on
Yep.
overseas, whether it's, shipping, all
Yeah.
of those issues. So a lot of jobs, manufacturing jobs coming back stateside, and the Midwest is very inexpensive,
Yes.
obviously very business friendly. So those are two markets I really love, and I've decided to invest my own capital there as well.
No, that's awesome. And I think industrial, you can't go wrong right now. Industrial would be the hottest, asset in next at least 5, 10 years. That's what it seems to me. So I've been
Yes.
looking at some industrial as well.
Oh, nice.
Just trying to figure out, but yeah, no, this is great. So is that a triple net deal?
It is. And that
Yes.
was the
That's
really fun
another,
part about
yes.
educating my investors about, hey, we're worried about expenses going up because of inflation. Let's talk about this wild thing called triple
Yeah,
net, where the
exactly.
tenants pay the taxes, repairs and maintenance, and
Yes.
insurance. Woo!
Yeah, you don't have to do pretty much anything. So you are saving on a lot of the payroll and stuff as well, because you don't have
Yes,
the property management side. Oh,
exactly.
this is great. Thank you so much for sharing all these golden nuggets. Are you ready
Of
for
course.
fire round?
Let's go. I'm ready.
Would you be changing any business or investment strategy because of inflation or recession?
No, I don't think I'm going to change, industry. I think it's definitely time to double down on being conservative. I've slowed down on my purchases without a doubt. I've been much more discerning. I think the type of debt that we use, understanding prepayment penalties,
Yeah.
understanding, interest rates, all of these things. I think all of us in the industry have sharpened our pencils and just made sure we're being good stewards of our investors' money. And being in markets that we think will recover from recessions more quickly, being in markets that we think will be more inflation resistant and recession resistant. So, I think I've definitely pivoted slightly in that I'm just making sure I'm extra conservative.
No, that makes sense. Favorite
Yes.
real estate or finance or any other related book?
Oh, a book. I don't know if this one counts. It's more economics. Am I allowed to talk about economics?
Sure.
All right. The Creature from Jekyll Island
Yeah.
by G.
Oh,
Edward
yeah.
Griffin.
Great
If you
book.
haven't read it, it is a long book. It
Yeah.
starts off slow, but I would have to say it's probably the top 3 books I've ever read in my life. It is an eye opener. And one of the reasons I love borrowing money and being in debt for cash flowing assets, because of what inflation does and how inevitable the destruction of the currency is.
No, it's a great book, and twice I gave up on it because, as you said, it's slow, right? But like I started
is.
reading, and I'm like, I can't. Then what I did, I went halfway and I finished it, and I'm like, okay, now it makes sense. But it's
Yes.
one of the book top there, like The Richest Man in Babylon, and this
Yes.
one, they're like, I would say the top 2 books everyone
Yes.
should read. Any tool or website you recommend or you cannot live without?
Oh, gosh. That's a really good question. I love housingalerts.com. It is a paid website.
Yes.
And it's single family focused in terms of forecasting real estate, but it is worth every penny. It is such an incredible resource, coupled with other free resources that we use as we do market research. But I just think the statistics there have guided us extremely well, and probably not a week goes by that we don't use it.
No, that's great. Any advice for beginner investors?
If you're able to, I think passively investing, if you're not looking to be a passive investor, if you're looking to be active, I think there really is something to be said for investing in other people's deals and learning on the job, learning what that looks like. If you're looking to be just a passive investor without doing your own deals, my biggest piece of advice would be get to know the operators. I think that the data is important, the deal is important, the markets are important, but the people that will be making decisions and guiding the ship, I think, are incredibly important to understand. Get to know how they think. Not everyone thinks the same. Not everyone has the same risk tolerance. As I mentioned, for us, we're willing to make maybe 0.5% less in return if it means we can treat our residents really well and create an amazing community. Other people may not think that way, and you may not think that way. So just getting really clear on what commonalities are and what you're looking for in your investment is a great thing to do, I think.
That's great. How do you give back?
Yes. So I mentioned a charity called Heart of LA is something my husband and I are very dearly committed to. It's an after-school program for children that are underprivileged and underserved in inner city Los Angeles. We know that, many folks, especially in an expensive city like LA, two-parent income, both parents having to work can be very difficult for children because after school, there are a lot of maybe not so great things that they can do with their time. So having enrichment programs in art and dance and culture and, even homework help with an after-school program, we think that's so incredibly important, and we love being able to support them.
Thank you so much for doing this. How can my listeners reach out to you?
Yes. So I am very active on LinkedIn. I post every day. I try very hard to add value and education, so you can reach me there. And then sylviscapital.com is my website. I'm assuming you'll put the spelling of my funky last name in the show notes, so you can get that right. If you add a /webinar, we have a little educational tutorial if you'd like to get to know a bit more about this space and what we do as well.
Thank you so much, Amy, for your time today.
Yes, this was so much fun. I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the Wealth Matters podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes so others can enjoy the show too. Have a great week and happy investing!